very close to the time for statements by members. I'll let the honourable member, la députée de Mégantic.
The honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable will have 12 more minutes for his speech when the House resumes the debate on this motion before the House.
Déclaration de député.
Statements by members.
Member for Nunavut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Liberal government is committed to improve the broken Nutrition North program. Although the program is meant to provide Northerners with improved access to food, Nunavut continues to have the highest rates of food insecurity in the country. Nearly 70% of homes in Nunavut are food insecure. This statistic is alarming when you consider Canada's status as a first world country. In 2016, INAC held consultations to gain insight on how to improve the program. The result of this consultation was what we heard report that was released last Friday. I've always been a strong advocate for improvements to be made to the Nutrition North program. As current MP and previous territorial MLA, I know that this report echoes and officially documents what we have been saying for many years. Given the dire food insecurity reality we face in Nunavut, the need for action on this program is now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for South Shore St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, summer is just around the corner, and with the nicer weather, more and more Canadians will be lacing up their running shoes and hitting the sidewalks and trails for their runs. Many of them training for and participating in marathons across the country. This year, I was impressed to learn that at least 9 of my constituents participated in the very prestigious Boston Marathon last month. One of these participants was 69-year-old Chris Anderson, who just ran his 113th marathon. Wow. Not only that, but this was Chris's 29th consecutive Boston Marathon. He even once ran the Boston Marathon with a broken foot and a modified cast, just to maintain his consecutive streak. I want to commend Chris for his dedication, hard work, and training as he continues to run those marathons. To qualify and run Boston is quite an achievement, and so I would like to congratulate Chris and all of the other Boston Marathoners from my riding and across the country on their athletic success.
Then you'll have
the honourable member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow will mark the 6th anniversary of the tragic death of Cassandra, who was hit by a drunk driver on May 3rd, 2011, at the age of 22. Marquita Collius, her mother, will be victimized once again, unfortunately, by the Liberals, who, for purely partisan reasons, want to put an end to Bill C-226 that seeks to counter the scourge of alcohol.
All MPs present here today to first think of victims of impaired driving and their families, and to vote tomorrow to support C-226 to proceed to committee for further review so we can save lives. Alors, Monsieur le Président.
So, Mr. Speaker, just for a moment, let's set aside partisanship and put victims first and vote for Bill C-226. The honourable member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, last week, the Mayor of Rigaud, Hans Greenwald Jr., and the Municipal Council declared a state of emergency in the region because of the melting ice and heavy rains that brought about serious flooding by the Ottawa River. Mr. Speaker, this morning we learned that the City of Rigaud has asked fellow citizens to evacuate once again because of recent rain and the rain forecast for the rest of the week. In these difficult moments, I want to underscore the important work done by the City of Rigaud, Éric Martel, head of the fire department, the police, firefighters, and volunteers who've worked hard and continue to work hard so that all those affected are safe. On behalf of my family, this House, and the entire community of Vaudreuil-Soulanges, I want to thank you for your dedication toward those who need it most. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
honourable member for North Island Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, it is with great sadness that I rise in this House today. On April the 20th, just days before the day of mourning, our riding had a sudden and devastating reminder of the dangers in the workplace when a train derailment killed 3 people and injured 2 more. I send my deepest and sincerest condolences to the families, friends, and workers who experienced this tragedy. To the people of WAS, I cannot fully express my sense of heartbreak. I want to acknowledge the emergency response efforts from the residents of WAS and the neighbouring communities, the RCMP, Victim Services, BC Emergency Health Services, North Island Critical Incident Response Network, North Island Crisis and Counselling Teams, doctors, nurses, health professionals, and site leaders. Thank you for the kindness of the community in providing food for the workers and families, the immediate community meeting where people came together to share their shock and grief. In times of sadness, I am grateful to belong to a riding that stands together in these painful times. All my thoughts to WAS. Thank you.
The honourable member for Vancouver Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today as both an MP and a physician to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Canadian Medical Association. In 1867, only 3 months after the birth of Canada, the CMA was formed with just 164 physicians. Today, the association represents more than 85,000 physicians and is a strong national advocate for patient health and for a system of healthcare that is based on evidence, measurable outcomes, and accountability. Yesterday was Doctors' Day in Ontario and Nova Scotia, and it is time to proclaim on this, their 150th anniversary, a National Physicians' Day, and I hope that all members in this House will support a motion to that effect, which I will bring forward. Canada's physicians and the CMA have served patients well for a century and a half. And I would like all members to...
The honourable member for Brantford-Brant.
Mr. Speaker, May the 8th will mark World Ovarian Cancer Day. Each year, 2,800 Canadian women are diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Without a screening test, ovarian cancer is usually detected at the advanced stage after cancer is spread. It can be devastating, and while most ovarian cancer patients initially respond well to treatment, relapse is common and there are few effective treatment options when cancer returns. Research teams across Canada have been at the forefront of designing new treatment strategies. With proper investment, more options will enter the pipeline, leading to more effective treatments for women. It's important that approved treatments are publicly funded and available. Lives depend on it. On behalf of the many affected Canadian women, their families and their friends, I ask that all members of Parliament join me in helping Ovarian Cancer Canada raise awareness of this worthy cause.
The honourable member for Burnaby North Seymour.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in the spirit of Canada's 150th anniversary to acknowledge our collective desire as Canadians to provide a better life for our families, our communities, and for future generations. One specific individual, Bajrangi Das Chadha, is a shining example of this effort. Having left his home in Lahore during the partition, he came from Punjab to Canada in 1978, where he sought a better life for his family and worked as a bridge operator at Canoe Pass. His 6 children, 19 grandchildren, and 15 great-grandchildren have adopted their Pitaji's work ethic, optimism, and desire to contribute, something I've witnessed firsthand after returning to the border of India and Pakistan to propose to his granddaughter, Ravi. Pitaji's youngest daughter, Sunita, and her husband, Ram Bansal, are in the parliamentary precinct today, and while it's not quite 150 years, Mr. Speaker, I would invite everyone in the House to join me in celebrating our beloved Pitaji on this, the occasion of his 101st birthday. Happy birthday, Pitaji.
Hey, all right.
The honourable member for Montarville. Mr. Speaker, allow me to read you a text written by 23 students in elementary school in my riding. In this world, there are exceptional people who don't get the recognition they deserve. That's the case of Marie Fragasso, a 6th grade teacher at Albert Schweitzer Primary School in St. Bruno. She got involved in many charitable and volunteer activities, even though she had 5 children herself, and went back to university to study education as a scout leader for children, including her own, for 15 years. She took attendance of all the children who were in figure skating To the great pleasure of 5th and 6th grade students, she takes 2 afternoons a week for Génie en Herbe for years now. She participates in a school parliament and has done so for 14 years. She's been involved in all kinds of projects, including an Christmas fundraising, and that's why we love her.
Edmonton West.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise today to recognize Cody Battersill, a dedicated supporter of Alberta's job-creating oil sands and founder of Canada Action, which runs grassroots campaigns in support of Canada's energy and resource sectors. You might recognize his organization by the ubiquitous I Heart Oil Sands shirts and stickers and buttons. Many years ago, Cody walked by a cosmetics store in Calgary that was encouraging consumers to boycott the oil sands. After researching the protests, Cody quickly found out it was funded by international special interests and extremist environmentalist groups and filled with false and misleading information about the impact of Alberta's industries. Cody has spent over $100,000 of his own money to fight misinformation on Alberta's oil sands and to educate people about the importance of our natural resource industry. Unlike the Prime Minister who wants to phase out the oil sands, I stand with Cody and say, I love oil sands.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, on April 21st, I had the pleasure of attending the 25th anniversary celebrations of the Gwich'in Comprehensive Land Claim Agreement in Fort McPherson, Northwest Territories. Land claims strengthen local participation in decision-making, create certainty about ownership, use, and management of land and resources. There are more than 10 land, resources, and self-government agreements being negotiated right now in my riding. And we have a real chance of finalizing some of these agreements. And I want to thank the Honourable Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs for her commitment in finding new solutions to long-standing negotiations. Congratulations once again to the Gwich'in, also to the Salt River First Nation, who will be celebrating their 50th anniversary of their treaty land entitlement claim this June. It is my most ardent wish that I will stand again in this House very soon to congratulate more NWT Indigenous governments on their newly finalized land claims and self-government agreements. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honour the life of an important member from my riding. I was deeply saddened to hear of the passing of David Franklin, the President of the Royal Canadian Legion Branch No. 385 in Aurora. Mr. Franklin was a remarkable leader in our community and served with pride. David was a long-serving member of the RCMP, a Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal recipient, President of the Aurora Legion, and more importantly, a husband, a father, a grandfather, a solid member of our Aurora community, and a wonderful, kind person. It is impossible to adequately describe the loss to our community of this individual. Suffice it to say, thank you, David Franklin, and Godspeed.
The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, to celebrate Canada's 150th birthday, I've decided to shine a light on the unique aspects of my riding, Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou. My goal is to highlight 50 places, 50 people, 50 events. To date, I've had the pleasure of visiting the Birkenforth Buddhist Monastery, the ice caves of Bridge Lake, which are known to the First Nations as the entrance to the Bear World, and participated in the local Cowboy Festival. We've roasted blends of Canada 150 coffee, cheered on our local quilters as they completed the Canada 150 creation, and witnessed for the first time since the 1920s the Kamloops Cenotaph clock working again when it was started during the Vimy Day commemoration. This summer is gearing up to be one of the most memorable, from paddling the Thompson River to celebrating the 150th annual Clinton Ball. I look forward to showing Canada the distinctiveness of our area and encourage everyone to join me in commemorating Canada's sesquicentennial.
The honourable member for Don Valley North.
Mr. Speaker, the month of May is Asian Heritage Month. It is a time to celebrate the many contributions of Canadians of Asian heritage to the growth and prosperity of Canada. As the Member of Parliament for Don Valley North, I invite the Canadians of all backgrounds to learn more this month about the many ways that the Canadians of Asian origin have enriched our country. Their struggles and achievements helped transform Canada into the culturally diverse, compassionate, and prosperous nation we know today. Asian Heritage Month is an excellent opportunity for all Canadians to take part in the many events happening this month in celebration of various Asian cultures. Please join in this celebration. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Last Sunday, thousands of citizens and forestry workers marched in Dolbeau-Mistassini to send a clear message. The forestry industry is at the heart of our communities and we must defend it at all costs. I had the opportunity to take part in this gathering, a symbol of the resilience and determination of our people faced with the repeated attacks of the U.S. toward our industry. This is an industry that is part and parcel of our DNA and hundreds of communities throughout the country. Today, I want to pay tribute to all those who marched to send this clear and loud message. I hope that the government heard the message and will respond to honor its responsibility toward our forestry communities. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, the Canadian softwood lumber industry is outraged by the lack of compassion and support by the Prime Minister and the Liberal government. 210,000 families are directly or indirectly affected by the countervailing duties that will affect all of Canada. What has the Prime Minister done since March 10, 2016, where he promised that new agreement would be in place within 100 days? Over 400 days later, what has been done? Nothing. He didn't even broach the subject with the U.S. President in February. The softwood lumber industry has no more confidence in him. It needs true architects in order to build a real agreement. Mr. Speaker, to parody the repetitive sentences of the Minister of International Trade, who tells us Canada wants a good agreement, not any kind of agreement, I'd say this: the Canadian softwood lumber workers want a good minister, not any minister, one who can defend them and save their jobs.
The Honourable Member for Don Valley West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is World Asthma Day, and spring allergy season is upon us, and for those of us with allergic asthma, this is a tough time of year. For some, it's a minor inconvenience. For others, however, it's a life-threatening disease. More than 3 million Canadians live with asthma. Every year, asthma attacks result in 70,000 emergency room visits, 250 deaths, and account for $2.1 billion in both direct and indirect healthcare costs. As the former president and CEO of the Asthma Society of Canada, I'm glad to have this opportunity to raise awareness about this disease, to call for further research, clean air to breathe, and to close gaps in our healthcare system, including for pharmaceuticals. No matter where we live in this country, we should have access to the best healthcare and medications possible to lead productive and healthy lives. Working with groups like the Asthma Society of Canada, we can ensure all Canadians living with asthma have the highest quality of life. Thank you.
Oral questions, questions orales. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Defence is refusing to explain why, at least twice, he misled Canadians about his role in Afghanistan. Simply saying that there's no excuse is not enough. He has lost the trust of our men and women in uniform. If the Prime Minister refuses to see the damages that this has caused, why should Canadians trust this government? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I am proud of the service of our Minister of National Defence. As a police officer, as a member of our armed forces, and as a minister today. The work that we do to support our men and women in the armed forces, helping them deliver on our international commitments, is always productive. Whether they're fighting against Daesh, whether they're working to stabilize and support NATO, they're always there and ready to serve. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Refuses to provide any explanation as to why he, on at least 2 occasions, misled Canadians about the role that he played in Afghanistan.
fabricating that he was the architect of the largest battle Canadians fought in, but he wasn't.
Shame.
This is not one of those things where sorry is going to be enough. He should be moved out. And if the Prime Minister refuses to see the damage that this is doing, why should Canadians have confidence in him?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I am proud of the service of the Minister of National Defence, whether it was as a police officer, whether it was a decorated member of the Canadian Armed Forces, or whether it's as our Minister of National Defence. The work that he and this government is doing every day to support the men and women of the Canadian Forces, to have a positive impact in the world, whether it's in the fight against Daesh or promoting regional stability in Eastern Europe through leading a framework nation in Latvia. This is the work that Canadians know needs to be done, and I'm proud of the work that the Minister of National Defence has been doing.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, no one has questioned the bravery of the Minister of Defence when he was a soldier. There are two documented cases of the Minister of Defence taking credit for the hard work and bravery of others, vastly exaggerating his role in a military operation. This is a serious issue, and it's deeply offended those who were actually on the battlefield. And he said these things as far back as 2015 when he was campaigning as a Liberal candidate in the last election. So my question for the Prime Minister is this. Did he know, was he aware about these fabrications before he appointed a Minister of Defence?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
The work the Minister of National Defence has done to serve his community, to serve his country, and continues to do is to the honour of all Canadians. The work we're doing internationally in the fight against Daesh, supporting our allies in NATO, and continuing to be strong leaders around the world, while we give the right tools and opportunities to show the leadership of the Canadian Armed Forces around the world, is something that is truly important to me. We stand by the Minister of Defence and the great work that he's doing.
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Minister keeps telling us that Canadians expect people to apologize when they've made a mistake, but actually Canadians also expect you to do the right thing when you've done something wrong. And the right thing for this Minister to do is step aside. On two occasions, he made a political calculation that by exaggerating his military resume, that somehow this would get him further ahead in politics. And that might be something that he did as a Liberal politician, but it's wrong for a minister who represents our men and women in uniform. Will the Prime Minister do the right thing and move him away from the defence?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the exemplary and extraordinary service that has characterized the life of the Minister of National Defence is one that we can all be proud of. As he stands up every day for the men and women of the Canadian Forces, focusing on giving them the tools and the opportunity to serve and lead the way we know they can on the world stage, the way the world needs Canada to show leadership. This is something that we are tremendously proud of as a government, and we continue to look for more opportunities to lead and serve around the world.
Order. I remind honourable colleagues of Standing Order 16.2, which provides that no member shall interrupt when another member has the floor. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister refuses to acknowledge the severity of this and the damage that it has done. That, more than anything else, tells you where his priorities are, and they're not with the military. He pulled our fighter jets out of the fight against ISIS when our allies asked us to stay. He cut $12 billion in funding to the Defence Department, and now he's refusing to remove a Defence Minister who has twice misled Canadians about his role in a military mission. So does the Prime Minister understand that his first step in changing course from the damage that he's doing to the military is to remove this Defence Minister?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when we took office, we actually increased the effectiveness of Canada's role against Daesh by doing what it was that we do best. We were on the ground training, supporting local militia, local troops as they took the fight directly to Daesh. That is something that we, as a country, have always excelled at. We demonstrated our capacities to do that in Afghanistan, and we continue to understand that giving the proper tools and funding to the Canadian military to be able to accomplish the goals that we set for them here in this House is extremely important, and I'm proud of this government's record.
The Honourable Member for Outremont.
Mr. Speaker, when they were in opposition, the Liberals called for a public inquiry into the shameful Afghan detainee scandal. So why did the Prime Minister tell his Defence Minister to block just such an inquiry?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The Minister spoke directly with the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner on this file. She is satisfied and she has closed this file.
The Honourable Member for Outremont.
I think the Prime Minister missed the question. The Defence Minister is on record as saying that it was the Prime Minister's office that decided there would be no inquiry. We're asking the Prime Minister to explain now why there will be no inquiry into the shameful Afghan detainee scandal. He was in favour of it in opposition. Why did he tell his minister to block it now? C'est ça la question. Pourquoi?
That's the question. Why does he want to prevent an inquiry about the fate of the Afghan detainees? Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Repeatedly confirmed that he has no information on the file, and as to the issue, the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner has repeatedly said that she is satisfied and is closing the file.
The Honourable Member for Outremont.
In fact, what the Ethics Commissioner said was this, that the Defence Minister told her that he played absolutely no role. He gave the Sergeant Schultz I know nothing answer. The problem is, he then went on to claim to be an architect, and senior military officials described him as playing a key intelligent role. Does the Prime Minister actually believe his Minister of Defence when he says he knows nothing about what went on with the Afghan detainees, when we know he played an...
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of National Defence has an exemplary record of service to this country, whether it's as a decorated police officer, a decorated military officer, or indeed as Minister of Defence. The work we are doing to demonstrate our support for the Canadian forces and giving them the tools and the opportunities they need in order to demonstrate leadership and bring Canada's positive impact to the world is extremely important to this government and will continue.
The Honourable Member for Outremont.
Next. The PBO plays a crucial role in holding a government to account, and guess what? That's what the Liberals used to believe when the Conservatives were in power. If the Prime Minister's changes had occurred under the last government, we would not have known about the F-35 costs, for example. The Prime Minister said that the PBO must, quote, be truly independent. So the question is, why is he muzzling it? Pourquoi le Premier Ministre
Why is the Prime Minister attacking the Parliamentary Budget Officer? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, we have given more resources and more independence to the Parliamentary Budget Officer. That's exactly what we promised, because we knew that after many years under Stephen Harper, we needed to give him the tools to ensure that he was independent from the government. And that's exactly why we are strengthening the powers and authorities of the Parliamentary Budget Officer. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, like thousands of people last Sunday, with my colleague, we walked in my riding to call upon the Government of Canada to remember how important the forestry industry is all across the country, but particularly in our region. We heard the Minister of International Trade coming back from China and saying that it would be good for the country to sell lumber to other countries. Well, we've been hearing that for 20 years. We've been doing that for 20 years. But what we want to know is, what is your plan? What are you going to do to ensure that forestry workers continue to have jobs? I don't think that the honourable member is asking me what my plan is, although I am concerned by it like him, of course. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. Speaker, we are working very closely with all of our provincial counterparts, as well as including the Government of Quebec, and we understand that our first and responsibility is to take all measures necessary to help the producers and workers and communities who are affected by these inappropriate duties. We are continuing to consult because we are persuaded that we will be able to find a solution that will help workers, communities, and producers. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. I would have been luckier to have an answer from you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Minister of Defense unfortunately exaggerated his record in Afghanistan. He lost the trust of his fellow men and women in uniform. This shows an immense lack of respect for his rank and for his colleagues. Simple question, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister of Defense think that he was the architect of Operation Medusa, yes or no?
Minister of National Defense.
Mr. Speaker, I would never detract from the accomplishments of our men and women in the Canadian Armed Forces. Our government will always work hard to making sure that that they're truly served. I'm honored to serve our men and women in uniform. I'm going to continue to work hard for them every single day to making sure they have the right tools, the right capabilities, and right care so they can carry out their missions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Defence Minister has been telling so many fictional stories that he can't keep his facts straight. For example, in 2015, the Minister claimed that General Vance coined the term that he was the architect for his work back in 2006 on Operation Medusa. But that can't be true because General Vance didn't take command in Afghanistan until 2009. Now, the Minister's fabrication was no mistake. This was his personal choice. If the Prime Minister lacks the good judgment to fire this minister, will the Defence Minister do the honourable thing and resign?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, as I stated, I would never detract from the great work of our men and women. Our government is focused on making sure that we provide the right care for our troops. That's why the Prime Minister mandated me to conduct a thorough defence policy review to making sure we do a thorough assessment that our troops can have all the right tools that so they can carry out their missions, and that's exactly what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Well, hear much sincerity from the Defence Minister today. No apology for his remarks and exaggerations. The military's feelings towards our Defence Minister has gone from disappointment to outrage. Former Air Force Commander General Bill Carr said, and he wrote, "Our Defence Minister's image is at best one of an insecure veteran in a field he professes to know. For the good of the Canadian Forces, his departure would be a relief. He has no alternative but to step down." Mr. Speaker, does the Defence Minister have any honour, integrity, or humility left? Will he do the honourable thing and step down?
Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the former general for his service to his country. We continue to work hard. Our government will continue to work hard at making sure our men and women have the right tools, and every single day to making sure that they have the right care, the right tools, and our defence policy review that we have conducted a thorough analysis on will do just that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, being sorry is not good enough when you've lost the trust of our men and women in uniform. Individuals who pad their military records can be court-martialed and face serious consequences. Now, the minister has a seat at the cabinet table, but does he think that he deserves to be treated differently than other soldiers that he served with?
Defense.
Mr. Speaker, I have the privilege of serving our men and women in the Canadian Armed Forces as a Minister of National Defence. And every single day I will work hard, as I've always done, to making sure that they have all the right tools, the right funding, and the care for them to carry out their missions. And we'll do that every single day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. It's entirely appropriate for members to ask tough questions and be aggressive in their questions. It's not appropriate to interrupt when another member is speaking.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the minister's misuse of alternative facts has so tarnished his reputation that he's lost all credibility. He has lost the trust of our soldiers and shamed our veterans. Canadians no longer believe him. He's become a laughingstock, and our allies won't be able to take him seriously. The Prime Minister has shown a lack of judgment by not kicking him out of the cabinet. As a veteran, I ask the minister, who is a veteran himself, if he still has some honor left. And if so, why doesn't he resign?
For defense.
Mr. Speaker, I understand the member opposite has a job to do. I, too, will also making sure that I, as Minister of National Defence, making sure we have all the right tools. We work very closely with our coalition partners to making sure that we take, as we have done as a government, taking a leadership role at NATO, increased our contribution to the Iraq mission, to making sure our men and women have all the right necessary tools to carry out the missions, whether it's home and abroad. And we will do just that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. Mr. Speaker, Earlier, the Prime Minister refused to answer these questions, so let's try asking them to the Minister of Defence himself. Why are the Liberals refusing to have a commission of inquiry, a public one, into the Afghan detainees scandal? Why did the Minister of Defence tell the Conflict of Interest Commissioner that he didn't know anything about this scandal because he was only a reservist? Would he be so kind as to tell this House what role exactly he actually played in Afghanistan? It's high time Canadians learned the truth.
Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to speak with any officer of Parliament. I've spoken to the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner on this subject, and she is satisfied with that, and she considers this matter closed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Esquimalt, Saanich, Sooke.
Well, Mr. Speaker, a meaningful apology must be followed by changed behaviour, transparency and accountability, and that's just not what we're getting from this minister. The Defence Minister told the Conflict of Interest Commissioner that he knew nothing about the transfer of Afghan detainees to face torture. However, both he and his supervisor in Afghanistan have said that he played a key role in intelligence liaison with local Afghan forces. Can the Minister of Defence tell us this? How can he simultaneously have known nothing about prisoner transfers to local Afghan authorities and at the same time have been Canada's key liaison person with these same forces?
Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of the work that our men and women in the Canadian Armed Forces and our civilians have conducted in Afghanistan. As I stated, I am pleased to speak with any officer of Parliament. I have spoken to the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, and she considers she is satisfied with the answer, and she considers the matter closed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Barrie Innisfil.
Question is, how does the minister explain making what he calls a mistake, standing in this House and saying he owns a mistake without any explanation as to why he made it? Is not contrition, Mr. Speaker, it's deflection. No one disputes the minister's service, but why did he feel justified in so blatantly exaggerating his record? Our troops need a minister who has their back, not someone so eager to pat himself on his. Will the minister stop with the Prime Minister's talking points and explain to Canadians why did he fabricate the story?
Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I take every opportunity to making sure that we highlight the great work of our men and women in the Canadian Armed Forces. Whether it's taking the trips into Iraq, making sure that they have the right necessary tools. I just recently was in Malaysia, where we had two of our ships also there, highlighting of the great work that they do in the Asia Pacific. Mr. Speaker, I will always highlight the great work of the men and women in the Canadian Armed Forces, like I always done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Beauport.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou.
Et Gloria du Comte. Partout.
Everywhere that right and glory lead. Mr. Speaker, this is the motto of the 6th Field Regiment, where I had the honour of performing my military service. Soldiers follow the orders of their superiors, not out of fear, but because they know that these orders are given to protect our country and our honour. The Minister of Defence broke that bond of trust. He's lost moral authority, so will he do the honourable thing and resign?
Honourable Minister of National Defence.
I do have the privilege of serving as Minister of National Defence. I want to be making sure that our government provides all the necessary tools, and that's exactly what we're doing with our Defence Policy Review, Mr. Speaker, to making sure we've done a thorough analysis, so making sure that they have all the right tools, the right funding, and most importantly, the right care, so they can carry out their missions at home and abroad. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Liberal Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Defence has a huge credibility problem, and every time he stands up, he digs himself deeper into the credibility hole. He is tarnishing the reputation of the Prime Minister. He is tarnishing the reputation of this government abroad. But worstly, he is tarnishing the reputation of our military. Nobody questions this man's honour and what he did when he served this country in the military. We are questioning his judgment and his honour today. Will he do the right thing for our men and women in uniform and step aside?
Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, as I stated, I would never want to detract any accomplishments from our Canadian Armed Forces. our government is focused on making sure our men and women in the Canadian Armed Forces have all the necessary tools to making sure that they're doing their job. Whether it's domestic operations supporting Canadians, or whether it's taking the increased leadership role in NATO, or increasing the fight against Daesh, Mr. Speaker, to making sure that they all have the necessary tools, and that's exactly what our government is going to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Well, Mr. Speaker, he's already distracted from the good work that the men and women in uniform have done and are doing. That's done. He can now try to make it right by giving them their honour back. So, Mr. Speaker, if our men and women in uniform try to steal valor and try to take credit for something that they didn't do in the military, there is a consequence in terms of discipline, in terms of the trust that they will have lost with their colleagues. Does the Minister of Defence not understand that he has broke this code of conduct, that he has broke trust? The only fix is for him to step aside, let our men and women in uniform have a leader who they can actually trust today.
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, we are focused on making sure that we provide all the necessary tools of our Canadian Armed Forces, to making sure that they actually have all the necessary tools when we as a government ask our folks to send them on important missions, Mr. Speaker. I have a privilege of serving in the National Defence. I'm honored to serve our men and women in the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm honored to be able to stand up as a representative of this government, as working through the Defence Policy Review, to making sure that they have all the necessary tools and the care for the men and women who serve us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Essex.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to trade with Liberals, secrecy appears to be the name of the game. Last week it was revealed that the government secretly walked away from a potential softwood lumber agreement with Obama. Thanks to Japanese news reports last week, we learned that TPP negotiations are back on and happening today in a secret location in Toronto. The Liberals in opposition criticized the Conservatives for negotiating major trade deals in secret and promised to do better. The TPP was a bad deal. Will the Liberals come clean with Canadians on why they are now leading the charge for TPP 2.0?
Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think Toronto is very secret, by the way. Mr. Speaker, we all know that trade is good for our nation. Trades mean growth, and growth means job, Mr. Speaker. What the members should understand is we want to be front and center when it comes to engagement about principled, modern, and inclusive trade in the Asia-Pacific. That's why I offered to have the officials come to Toronto. Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect that of us. The Prime Minister expects that of me. That's the smart thing to do for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals failed to negotiate a softwood lumber agreement. They also failed to prepare a plan to deal with the crisis that is now very real. Countervail duties have an impact on production in the mills. The government needs to understand that these countervail duties are affecting thousands of jobs and that thousands of families will suffer as a result. How is it that the Minister of Natural Resources still hasn't disclosed immediate measures to deal with the crisis? And how much longer will he drag his feet on the softwood lumber issue? The Honourable Member of Natural Resources.
The government has been working for months, but not only with the Government of Canada, but right across the country with all of our provincial counterparts. And we know that we need both in the short term and in the long term a plan for the forestry sector. In the short term, it's essential that we look after workers and producers, and we will use every instrument available to us, and looking at the long term to make sure that there's an expansion of export markets, that we support the transition of the industry. We know how important the forestry sector is for Canadians from coast to coast to coast.
Honourable Member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, our government was elected on a platform to build sustainable communities from coast to coast to coast. Clean, safe drinking water is one of the most important ways that we can ensure our communities are thriving. Will the Minister tell the House how the government is supporting vital water infrastructure?
Honourable Minister of Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the honourable colleague from Kildonan and St. Paul for her question. Last month, our government joined the province of Manitoba and the Association of Manitoba Municipalities to announce 24 new water and wastewater projects with a combined investment of $34 million to upgrade, rehabilitate, and expand water and wastewater facilities. Mr. Speaker, these investments will have a real and tangible impact on communities and families while ensuring they have safe and clean water to drink. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Calgary Shepherd.
Mr. Speaker, criticism was swift and consistent in response to the dual appointment of Stéphane Dion as ambassador to both the European Union and to Germany. Each is a crucial and critical portfolio to manage. Now the European Union has rejected Stéphane Dion as ambassador. Can the Prime Minister explain why he would insult two of our strongest and closest allies by suggesting that Canada's relationship with each of them was a part-time job?
Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, Stéphane Dion is a great Canadian public servant, statesman, and above all, a patriot who did tremendous work to keep our country together. I am confident that Stéphane Dion will do an equally outstanding job representing our country in Europe. And I must say I have heard personally from Europeans, including Chancellor Merkel, including Federica Mogherini, how delighted they are to have Stéphane Dion there. For me, it's an honor to work with him.
Honorable Député de Lévis-Lotbinière.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, Liberal promises, even within the party, seem hard to keep. To thank Stéphane Dion for his years of service, or was it to push him aside and free up a seat in Montreal, the Prime Minister appointed him ambassador to Germany and ambassador to the European Union. But, Mr. Speaker, here's a twist. The European Union is refusing to play with the Prime Minister's game. Can the Prime Minister now tell us what led to the European Union's rejecting the appointment and why the EU has required him to be a special envoy instead of an ambassador? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I just said in English, Stéphane Dion worked hard to build a better country for all Canadians. Mr. Dion understands the transatlantic relationship that we have with our European counterparts and will advance our common interests and values. It's a privilege for me to work with Mr. Dion, and I know that our European allies also have great respect for Mr. Dion, as do Canadians.
Mr. Speaker, we've asked many times for an explanation of the bizarre double ambassadorial appointments of Stéphane Dion after he was shuffled out of cabinet. Appointments publicly ridiculed by former Canadian diplomats, as well as more quietly among current foreign affairs professionals, and which did offend the EU. Well, today, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Dion finally came clean before the Foreign Affairs Committee. His bizarre twofer appointment, he says, was the Prime Minister's decision and the PM's alone. So will the PM finally take responsibility for his spectacularly bad decision?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I would rather characterize the appointment of Stéphane Dion, an outstanding Canadian, to this essential role as a spectacularly good decision. Stéphane Dion has fulfilled over many years his many roles in the service of Canadians with honor, with dignity, and with intelligence, and he will do the same thing in Europe. We should all be proud that he'll be there for us.
Excellent. Canadians expect members not to interrupt, so we're going to go on now to the Honourable Member for Victoria.
Last year, the Health and Justice Ministers commissioned the Council of Canadian Academies to conduct independent studies into the eligibility criteria under the new law on medical assistance in dying. Dr. Harvey Schipper is a vocal opponent of that law, yet he has now been made chair of a committee under it. This raises serious doubts about the impartiality of the entire process. Mr. Speaker, how can Canadians have any confidence that the working group will examine the issue fairly when its chair opposes medical assistance in dying?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the Council of Canadian Academies uses a totally independent process when naming individuals to this panel. I found out at the same time as the public found out the names of the individuals. Individuals are named to the panel to debate the evidence before them and not to debate their personal views. While each panelist may approach the topic from a particular standpoint, the entire panel comes together to assess the evidence. The panel has 43 people on it who undoubtedly have varying personal views. We expect them to work with diligence and to examine the evidence appropriately.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagot. While Quebec is putting in place an expert panel and wants to broaden eligibility for medical assistance in dying, we've just learned that the minister has accepted the appointment as chair of the working group on advance requests, Dr. Harvey Schiffer, who is opposed to medical assistance in dying and advance requests. Several stakeholders have denounced this appointment, and they are right in doing so. How can Canadians have confidence and believe that this working group will be truly objective and impartial, knowing full well that the chair is one of its fiercest opponents?
Santé.
The Honourable Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, as I just said, we turned to the group, to the council, to find people for the panel.
These are esteemed academics. They were chosen by an independent process by the Council of Canadian Academies. They did so in order to examine these issues, and we expect them to do so with the utmost integrity.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians working in finance and mortgages are concerned. Home Capital Group, which is working in the field of mortgage lenders, has saw its shares plunge last week following an investigation of its operations. That has raised concern, a loss of confidence for people in financial circles in Canada. The Minister of Finance's duty is to reassure Canadians and to set the record straight. Accordingly, can the Minister of Finance inform this House when he learned of this situation? What does he know about this tragic situation, this crisis, and what is he doing? The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to update the House on this situation. We've been very closely monitoring this situation as soon as we understood that there was a challenge with the company in question. We were pleased that there was a market-based solution that was found in order to resolve the situation for the company in question. And we believe that our financial system is strong and resilient, and this is evidence that we're able to find market-based solutions to challenges. That's a strength of our economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, as much as these Liberals claim to be consulting and listening, over the Finance Committee, witness after witness, including the Liberals' own witnesses, told us they were not consulted before the Liberals forced their mortgage changes onto Canadians. Had the Liberals bothered to listen to the industry, they'd know that the issues facing companies such as Home Capital are very serious. When will the Finance Minister start listening to the experts from the Canadian mortgage industry?
The Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, again, I'm happy to address this issue. It is true that we are facing some pockets of risk in our housing markets in Vancouver and Toronto, and certainly it is true that there was a challenge with this particular company. We do not see those two things as linked. Importantly, what happened in this situation was that there was a flight of depositors from the company in question, and what we did was we listened, we heard, we stayed very engaged. The market also was engaged, and we were pleased to see that there was a market-based solution to dealing with this challenge in our financial markets, and that's exactly the way the system should work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Carleton.
When most people get insurance, they pay a premium. If they have a claim, they pay a deductible. But CMHC offers banks full insurance against losses, while home buyers pay the premium and taxpayers pay the deductible. The banks pay neither. Hundreds of billions of dollars are at risk as a result. Has the government calculated how much taxpayers could lose if a market correction causes home prices to go down or higher interest rates cause mortgage defaults to go up?
Great question.
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, again, I'm very pleased to answer this question. In fact, yes, we have a system in this country that works very effectively. What we do is we have an insurance system that helps to ensure that people's housing is safe, and that is working. What we will continue to do is remain vigilant around this system to make sure that we are considering how risk is best shared between those insurers and the federal government through the CMHC and to participants in the market. We have said that we will look at that risk sharing in order to make sure that it continues to appropriately deal with market challenges, and that is what we're engaged in doing.
Honourable Member for Niagara Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government has made it clear that it takes an evidence-based approach in its decision-making. This is important to maximize efficiency and potential across Canada.
Our transportation network is no exception, and we need to be able to evaluate performance and make targeted investments. Can the Parliamentary Secretary inform Canadians on how they intend to make our transportation network even more efficient with the new innovative elements contained within Budget 2017?
Now, member for Banff Airdrie.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal House Leader claims she's having discussions with all MPs about substantive changes to our democracy. What she's actually doing is ramming through a motion to make the Liberals less accountable to Canadians. The Liberal member from Malpeque thinks there should be all-party consensus, and even the Liberal platform itself says so, and I quote, "We will look at ways to make question period more relevant and will work with all parties to recommend and bring about these changes." So did she actually read their platform, or is she taking communications lessons from the Defence Minister?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to rise. I have shared information in regards to the government's approach to respond and to really be able to deliver on the commitments that we made to Canadians. In the campaign, we made commitments to modernize the way this place works. In the letter that I provided to opposition House leaders, I actually shared direct quotes from the platform so that they could see where those ideas were coming from. I was actually hoping to have an even larger conversation with new ideas. Unfortunately, there was an unwillingness from the opposition side to have that conversation. I welcome to continue sharing ideas and really bringing this place into the 21st century. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Niagara Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the second opportunity. Mr. Speaker, this government has made it clear that it takes an evidence-based approach in its decision-making process. This is important to maximize efficiency and potential across this great nation, Canada. Our transportation network is no exception, and we need to be able to evaluate performance and make targeted investments. Mr. Speaker, can the Parliamentary Secretary inform all Canadians on how they intend to make our transportation network more efficient within the new innovative ideas and elements contained within Budget 2017?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Niagara Centre for his question. High-quality, accessible data and high-quality analysis is key in order to make smart decisions as a government. I'm proud to say that our government has committed $50 million in Budget 2017 to launch a new and innovative trade and transportation information system. This will help us make the targeted investments in transportation corridors that will foster growth and create good, well-paying jobs for Canada's middle class.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Several municipalities in Berthier-Masquinongé, like several across Quebec, are grappling with major flooding, as is the case in Yamashish. I have two questions today. What is the government's plan to help these municipalities and these people? And secondly, can the Minister of Transport tell us whether an investigation in Yamashish has been undertaken and when that information will be publicly disclosed? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We acknowledge the difficult situation facing several municipalities in Quebec and across Canada when it comes to flooding. The Minister of International Trade will today speak to the specific situation in Yamashish. We acknowledge the importance of safe navigation that respects the environment, and when the incident occurred, the Coast Guard had, at the behest of the Coast Guard, a request to reduce speed. We are currently looking into the situation. We will investigate. We will take all steps as required.
Michel.
Honourable Member for Saint-Léonard, Saint-Michel. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2017 allocates funding for technology linked to energy efficiency and clean energy technology for upgrading federal buildings and to reduce or eliminate emissions from vehicle fleets. Can the Minister of Natural Resources tell this House how the government is supporting electric vehicles and alternative fuel infrastructure as a means to transition towards low-carbon transportation options? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Saint-Léonard-Saint-Michel for his excellent question. The transportation sector represents some 25% of greenhouse gas emissions. Our budget will continue to support green infrastructure with investments of some $100 million for electric vehicles.
People spend a lot of time and effort championing what many have argued to be one of the planet's organizations that spends the most time on anti-Israel motions, and that, of course, is the United Nations. Now, today, while Israel is celebrating its 69th anniversary of becoming a modern state, the UN passed yet another anti-Israel motion. Will the Prime Minister today stand up in this House and condemn the United Nations for its continuous attacks on Israel?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is a steadfast friend and ally of Israel, as I was honored to say at the World Jewish Congress in New York last week, and I will be delighted to repeat that tomorrow at the Israeli Embassy, where I will be the guest of honor at the Independence Day celebration. I believe the member opposite was speaking about the UNESCO action, and I want to be clear that we object to any attempt to unfairly single out Israel for criticism, including in multilateral forums like UNESCO.
The Honourable Member for Pierre-Boucher, Verchères les Patriotes. Mr. Speaker, the National Assembly unanimously adopted a motion moved by Martine Ouellet reiterating that the Quebec dairy industry and the family farms are directly linked, in fact, to supply management. The motion by the National Assembly demands that the Government of Canada maintain supply management if NAFTA is reopened. Will the government make a solemn commitment to fully maintain supply management before undertaking and during negotiations with the Americans? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, the U.S. is our partner, our trading partner, is our biggest trading partner, in fact, and commerce in between the two countries is some $47 billion. So we are fully aware of the importance of this for the agricultural sector. The minister is keen to speak to the new representative in the United States once that person has been appointed. Our government will continue to protect and defend farmers and supply management. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member from Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, yesterday in this House, the Honourable Minister for Natural Resources stated, one, that he disagreed with the punitive countervailing duties. Fine. Two, he also said that he's created a federal-provincial group to support the forestry sector. Okay. Three, and finally, he said that he was supporting forestry workers. Then why is the government so bent on refusing to do what is being called for by Quebec forestry workers and the industry in providing support? And by that, I mean loan guarantees.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for actually accurately portraying our position, that we are working with all of those across the country who have an interest in this file. Together, we're focusing in on the short-term realities of the possibility of layoffs and job losses in Quebec and elsewhere. We're talking about transition in the industry. We're talking about the expansion of export markets. And we're taking seriously across the country to do whatever we possibly can to soften the blow of these punitive and unwelcome tariffs.
I believe that there is a point of order for the Honourable Member for Outremont.
Yes, it's about a question from a member opposite. When I heard the government House Leader on the Liberal side was offended, I offered my apologies this morning, which I'd like to repeat right now. I appreciate the comment by the Honourable Member for Outremont.
The Honourable Member for Glanbrook is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, over the 11-plus years I've been in this House, I've witnessed all kinds of heckling from all corners of the House, depending on the subject, some volume more, some less. I would hazard to say that everybody looks in the mirror, they'd see that they were guilty on a continuum in some way, shape, or form. But certainly, one of the people that has been the least guilty of that has been the member for Thornhill. In fact, the only thing I can remember is a member from Thornhill was the victim of one of the most egregious heckles, calling him a piece of waste from the other side of the chamber, Mr. Speaker. So I would ask you to maybe reassess that judgment in regards to taking a question from the fine member from Thornhill.
I am actually grateful to the member for Glanbrook,